A few days ago, Mexico had a daily death toll that was higher than the U.S., and it has a bit more than a third of the population. The government is saying, hang on, some of these are just revised causes of death and not to panic. But surely the hard data must be alarming to Mexicans.
Correct. That big movement, it was this week. In one day, the death toll jumped by more than 1,000 people. The government said, calm down, it's basically an accounting error. We're just adding some deaths that are coming in now that happened before. This didn't all happen today. But that added to a sense of distrust in the government. And the distrust in the government in Mexico is pervasive and predates this administration, to be sure. But the way this administration has managed this particular crisis has aggravated that distrust and gone on to see results like your report, where people are just not following the recommendations that the government gives out.
We are, of course, talking about the administration of Andrés Manuel López Obrador, the left of center government that he runs there. He won the election. He was quite popular and has had a series of bad luck, disasters domestically, if you will. How is this one going down?
Well, this one is actually mining away at his popularity, and you see him reacting. You see him reacting angrily because the crises that had come before, many of his own creation, many to do with the bilateral relationship. Donald Trump has been a very difficult U.S. president for Mexico to manage. But Andrés Manuel López Obrador had gotten through those without too much trouble, without losing too much in popularity. In fact, he lost some, but he remained in the high 50s and 60s, which is great for a Mexican president. It's almost unheard of in the last 40 years. But this crisis and the deaths that come with it, they are starting to affect the way Mexicans see him, and his government is starting to lash out on account of that.
Mexican officials have talked about, quote, a new normal. You had Dr. López-Gatell, who's leading the country's response. He's been accused of being over-optimistic, and critics say there's not enough testing. What are your thoughts?
Well, certainly testing has been atrocious in Mexico. The level of testing by OECD standards, for instance, Japan has a very low level of testing, and I believe it's like something like 5 times that of Mexico, or just a much higher, the second lowest. López-Gatell has lost a lot of credibility. He's defended the president. He's had to contradict himself. President López Obrador is a lot like Trump in that he will say certain things that don't always match up with objective reality. And López-Gatell has been the spokesman for this crisis, and his credibility has been reduced, and the credibility of Mexicans in any program suggested by the government to mitigate this crisis has, in consequence, followed.
A lot of northbound migration, legal or illegal, to the U.S. starts in Mexico or goes through Mexico from Central America. How has the pandemic changed that?
Well, it's lowered it, certainly. I mean, there's 2 factors at play. The first one is people are not leaving Central America as much because Central America is in as much of a lockdown as Mexico. Some countries more so. El Salvador's lockdown has been very effective, sometimes criticized for its potential human rights violations. Guatemala, another major exporter of migrants, is locked down but doesn't have as much control over its population. So first of all, there's not so many people crossing, and then Mexicans themselves aren't moving as much because there is that reality of deaths. There is that reality that you see funeral homes are packed, mortuaries are packed, and people do know that something is wrong. It's just that they don't know if they trust the government. And certainly coming to the United States, that's been the epicenter of the pandemic now for over a month, is not as attractive as it was 2 or 3 months ago.